Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Holocaust Memorial Day event. It's hosted by Stand Up to Racism. This Friday, as I'm sure you will all know, the 27th of January, marks the day in 1945 when the Nazi death camp Auschwitz-Birkenau was liberated. And our online event this evening is just one of many meetings taking place internationally in Britain as well to commemorate the millions who were murdered systematically by the Nazis in a genocide really like no other. In just 4 years, 1941 to 45, 6 million Jewish people were systematically targeted, persecuted, murdered in the Shoah. And further millions, including Roma and Sinti, disabled people, LGBT+, trade unionists, political opponents, were also murdered. Tonight, the aim of our meeting is to commemorate those who died, to reflect on the lessons we can all learn from such a horrific and catastrophic moment in our history. And also raise the importance of organising to ensure that we can make that such important statement, never again, into more than a heartfelt pledge, but a reality. My name is Michaela Loebner, and I'm honoured to be chairing this evening. I myself, I'm an activist in South London, Stand Up to Racism. I'm a teacher in London, but I'm also the daughter of a Jewish refugee. My father arrived here in 1938, and he came from Vienna, and he arrived as part of the Kindertransport scheme at the age of 13. And he was one of, I think, 10,000 children who came to Britain from not just Austria, but Germany and Czechoslovakia. And he left behind his grandmother, who looked after him, and he never was to see her again or any of his relatives in Vienna. By 1942, the majority of Jews who lived in Vienna had been deported, and people may know that the speed of persecution and murder, deportations and ultimately murder of the Jews in Austria was extraordinarily fast, and many people tried to leave and fled Vienna, Austria, and my dad, I guess, was one of those. His own grandmother and relatives, well, I only know of his grandmother, she was deported to Theresienstadt, where she perished amongst others. I think it's hard to comprehend the enormity of the Holocaust, but it's so absolutely vital in honouring the dead and the survivors of Nazi death camps and those who endured persecution that we do bear witness. And at a time when the racist right and the fascists are on the rise in Europe again, it's imperative that we do so and that we understand that we also have to act. And so in that context, I'm really grateful for the speakers we have this evening. It's a quite small panel of speakers, but a powerful panel that I think you will agree. We're going to begin this evening hearing from Rabbi Herschel Gluck. And Rabbi Herschel Gluck is the president of Shomrim in Stamford Hill, the founder of the Muslim Jewish Forum, and a prominent campaigner against racism, against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So I'm going to hand over to you, Rabbi, to speak to our audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction and for your warm words. Interesting, because my mother also came over as a refugee in 1938 on the Kindertransport from Vienna. Even though she wasn't Viennese, she was from a small village in southeast Austria, but her parents felt that there was no future for her in Vienna. And when they heard about the Kindertransport, they sent her over. When I was a kid, there were children who said to me that black people, when they grow old, don't have any white hair. And the proof was that they've never seen a black person with white hair. Of course, the reason for that was because all the black people who one saw were from the Windrush generation, who in the early 60s were all young people, and there was no old people. There are people who say there's so many Jews around. What's all this about Holocaust? In my class in school, I was one of the only children who had grandparents, because all of them had been killed. My mother's parents and over 100 members of her family were murdered. My father's parents survived, thanks God, but they also lost members of their family, including a son, my father's brother, who was murdered in Drancy. And these type of stories, I think, are so important to remember, that sadly, instead of creating coalitions of people who have suffered to work against future suffering, we are divided. We are atomized. We turned one against the other. Instead of working together, instead of building coalitions, instead of building alliances to create a better future, a better world. In Judaism, we don't have history, we have memory. What's the difference between history and memory? History is an academic subject, something that happens to others. Memory is like trauma, that we constantly and consistently feel it. But unlike trauma, it's something productive and constructive. It's something which brings about positive change. Memory. You say never again. Never again isn't saying, oh, oy vey, we had what happened 80, 90 years ago. Never again means that the causes that led to 6 million men, women, and children being systematically murdered, that those causes must never again raise their ugly head. And what are those causes? The causes are expressed in 3 words: crimes against humanity. And that is the dehumanizing the other, dehumanizing people. When we take away the humanity of the other, so then the murder, the eradication follows soon after. And I think that when we say never again, when we say that we have to remember what happened, it is because this speaks to us today. When thousands of people literally are drowning in the Channel, are drowning in the Aegean Sea, are drowning in the Mediterranean, because the places where their families have lived for centuries have become uninhabitable, that they feel that they can't continue to live there, however much they want to. And often because of the actions of the countries of which we are citizens. And they feel that they've got to leave and come to a place where they can rebuild their lives and the lives of their children, as our grandparents did, as our parents did. So then we have to say, never again will we turn our backs on these people. In 1905, the British government brought into legislation the Aliens Act. The purpose of the Aliens Act was to keep the Jews out. Too many Jews, invasion of Jews, they're swarming into Britain. In 1905 was about 35 years before the Holocaust. Imagine all those people that could have come into this country and would have been alive and would have been able to have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But instead, they ended up in the ovens of Auschwitz because of the Aliens Act. Recently, a Polish friend of mine sent me a picture of our bobbies in 1939 deporting Jews to Poland. In all probability, those Jews were murdered because they were kicked out of this country in 1939. The inhumanity of man against man, what we are remembering today, isn't just about the murder of 6 million Jews, of 1 million Roma and Sinti, of hundreds of thousands of disabled people and gay people, and the subsequent terrible murders in Bosnia, in Cambodia, in Sudan, etc. It's about us not giving dignity and respect to the humanity of people, that they should be able to live dignified lives, to be able to work, not to be locked up in detention camps, which resemble concentration camps, because concentration camps are not extermination camps. When we hear that people are being sent off to the south to Rwanda, the echoes of Jews being sent to the east to Auschwitz echoes in our mind, because these actions dehumanize and take away dignity and take away the humanity and take away the compassion, which is the hallmark of a civilized, humane society. So therefore, when we speak about Holocaust Memorial Day, it's not just about a memorial of what happened 70, 80, 90 years ago. It's about a memorial of the state of society in 2023 in England. And it screams out to us, you who remember what happened to your ancestors, the pain of the inhumanity of man against man. What are we doing today to ensure that society becomes more human, more humane, and treats people with real respect and dignity? That is the message, I think, for us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Gluck. They were extraordinarily powerful words and really spoke to all the issues that we're facing. I'd like to now introduce to you Daniella Abraham. Daniella is speaking on behalf of the Roma Sinti Holocaust Memorial Trust, which is dedicated to commemorating the genocide against the Roma and Sinti people. Over to you, Daniella, and thank you for being with us.
I would like to say thank you for the Stand Up to Racism, that they have made it possible for me to speak and tell my story about my great-grandparents. I'm originally come from former Czechoslovakia, now Slovakia. And yeah, I live in the UK with my family and with my children. Since my early childhood, I was like a very great listener to the oral storytelling tradition of my family, especially those stories concerning the Second World War. I'm a progeny of the musician Roma family. By the men of the family would work as a stonemasons in the evenings and as a musicians, especially to the grand bourgeoisie and aristocracy. I come from South Slovakia, and we are like Hungarian Roma. I would say Hungarian Jewish Roma, because we are like mixed. My great grandfather Rudolf was born in Czechoslovakia in 1918, and in his childhood he suffered an injury causing one of his arms to be shorter than the other. However, he was able to demonstrate intelligence and matriculated from grammar school and become a double bass player. On my mother's side of the family, were again a musician Roma, with my great grandfather on my mother's side being very well known violinist of the region. And with the coming to power of Adolf Hitler, the commencement of the Second World War, the concentration of the Gestapo and the death camps started. Sorry, I just don't want to be emotional, but it's very difficult to speak and talk about this part of our life story, especially knowing now that what is happening in Europe, with the Roma, with my Roma friends and families. When they started to deport the Roma and the Jews in Europe, and the Roma were placed in the railway boxcars, and they have been deported and imprisoned to these concentration camps. My great-grandmother had 8 siblings, whom all died during the Second World War. And in the village of my great-grandparents, when the Nazis occupied that region, they declared a public order. All those of Roma should stand out in front of their houses. And this order was inclusive all the children, the aged men, and the women. The men were immediately separated and rounded up and taken in the boxcar railway wagons, like separately. The rest of the old, very young, and the women were taken away also in the railway boxcars. Before the deportation, to the great humor and pleasure of the Nazis, my great-grandmother, Helena, was abused through having a haircut and being raped. My great-grandfather, with 2 others, managed to escape the railway boxcars, and on the foot, always hiding, was able to return to his home, to the village. When he did found his wife after being in very critical condition, this is not the end of the story, this horrible story. After a long chain of events, a humiliation, a harassment, and abuse, they successfully escaped, and after the war settled down in the city of the banks of the Danube River, where basically I came from this small town. But for security reasons, I don't want to mention exactly from where. But I can tell you that 27 of years of my life I have been lived there, and I could never understand like why they have to suffer, and who declared that order that allowed harming and abuse these wonderful people. None one of them were criminals or parasites, and they were all good citizens. The Holocaust allow us to see the bestial depths, what men prepare to sink to. And this includes all of us. We are all the same as one another. For this reason, it is the duty of the state to defend its citizens, despite of the race and religion. And this is what we would like to be, but unfortunately, this is not the case. However, my hope is that the coming generations will not commit the mistakes of those that preceded them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daniella. And we're all grateful that you spoke this evening, and appreciate how hard it is to say the things that you're saying. Our next speaker is David Rosenberg. And David is an anti-racist, anti-fascist campaigner. He's a leading member of the Jewish Socialist Group. He's an educator, a writer, and a tour guide. And he has been one of the co-organizers of Stand Up to Racism and Unite Against Fascism's trip to Auschwitz. And he's going to speak to us now. So thank you, David, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here. In February 1935, several years before Hitler advocated what he called his final solution to the Jewish question, one fascist wrote, "The most certain and permanent way of disposing of the Jews would be to exterminate them by some humane method such as the lethal chamber." Who was that? He was Arnold Leese, a retired veterinary surgeon from Lincolnshire. By the mid-1930s, he headed a small, virulently anti-Semitic grouping in Britain called the Imperial Fascist League. Their flag, a Union Jack overlaid with a black swastika in a white circle. Some academics still claim that there is something essentially German about fascism. But nearly 80 years after the war, we should know that fascism, with its ethno-nationalism and authoritarianism, can arise anywhere. No people is immune from it. The Nazi destruction of the Jews and Roma lives in Europe could not have been achieved by them alone. They needed collaborators to assist them. They needed others to look away and to refuse to see what was happening before their eyes. Had the Nazis occupied Britain, they would have found enthusiastic collaborators among fascist activists and among a range of powerful upper-class networks that flourished here in the 1930s, especially the Right Club, the Link, and the Anglo-German Fellowship, who were delighted that Hitler was, as they saw it, dealing with what was called the Jewish problem. On the very day that war broke out between Britain and Germany, the 5th Duke of Wellington vented his anger at the, quote, anti-appeasers and fucking Jews. Among conservative MPs in the 1930s, there were several open anti-Semites, such as Captain Ramsey, MP for Peebles and South Midlothian. He regarded all Jews as evil, though I don't think he encountered many in his constituency. He lapped up false and malicious propaganda that there was a Jewish conspiracy to take over the world. Well, anti-fascists actually knew that it was aristocrats like him who had actually taken over the world and who were hoarding its resources. Another MP at the time was Nancy Astor, often lauded by shadow cabinet member Rachel Reeves as the first woman to sit in Parliament. But Astor was a fanatical supporter of Hitler and promised that he would solve, as she put it, the world problem of Jews and communism. Mind you, unlike Captain Ramsey, she made exceptions. At a private gathering, she introduced her friend Chaim Weizmann, later the first president of Israel, as a speaker, and described him as the only decent Jew I ever met. And yet, the British establishment continued to tell themselves that the Holocaust happened over there, and that Britain had nothing to do with it, and of course helped to defeat Hitler. The Black Lives Matter movement rightly tell us that we need to decolonize the telling of history, and it's time to decolonize the Holocaust, to ask awkward questions about what the British state was doing in those years. It was not just a matter of friendships between Nazi-supporting aristocrats in Britain and Germany, but about hundreds of thousands of asylum applications from Jews in the 1930s that were ignored or rejected. The failure of politicians and civil servants to treat seriously reports of huge systematic massacres of civilians that marked the beginnings of the Holocaust. They dismissed those reports as exaggerated. They refused to contemplate any special actions to rescue Jews in ghettos and offer sanctuary to refugees, or slow down the killing process by bombing the train lines leading to Auschwitz. In Caxton Hall, Westminster, a prominent Polish Jewish socialist, Shmuel Ziegelboim, revealed to a packed International Labour Party meeting in September 1942 reports of the first use of poison gas as a weapon of mass murder. 40,000 Jews held in Chełmno, Poland, were gassed over a period of 7 weeks. And we know now that that included some Roma too. He said, "The conscience of every person must be shaken. The serenity of those who ignore the facts must be exploded." The questions of the British state go beyond 1945. Why was the British state so mean-spirited about taking in refugees from the DP camps, the displaced persons camps, in the late 1940s? Britain took in relatively few Holocaust survivors compared with other countries, and those who entered depended on private initiatives by remarkable people, several of them not Jewish, rather than official government policy. In Britain, Holocaust Memorial Day was first officially commemorated in 2001 on 27th of January, the day the Red Army liberated Auschwitz. Auschwitz was the most extensive of 6 death camps the Nazis constructed, all of them in Poland, where victims were industrially slaughtered in gas chambers. The Holocaust should never be seen as something inexplicable that happened outside of history. It happened in the real world, within an economic system that channeled the skills of trained architects, engineers, scientists, physicians, administrators to create factories of death that deprive the world of the talents of millions of other human beings who they labeled inferior. All of that in the context of modernity and capitalism. Auschwitz actually had 3 components. Auschwitz I was a prison and concentration camp for Polish political prisoners, trade unionists, homosexuals, and others deemed asocial. Many perished there from starvation. A second camp, Monowitz, consisted of slave labor factories, especially those built by the private chemical company IG Farben, and armaments factories established by the manufacturer Krupp. Tens of thousands of slaves, mainly Jews, were worked to death there. Life expectancy for slaves was 3 to 4 months. The great Italian Jewish writer Primo Levi survived slave labor at Monowitz. The third and best known component was the killing center at Birkenau, 2 kilometers from Auschwitz I. and it was dedicated only to extermination. Around 1 million Jews and 21,000 Roma and Sinti gypsies were exterminated there in gas chambers. The guinea pig trials for killing by gas took place in September 1941. 600 Soviet prisoners of war were selected for execution, plus 250 Polish political prisoners considered unfit for work and therefore no use to the Nazis. Instead of ordering them to be shot, the camp commandant experimented with mass killing by hydrogen cyanide gas. In Germany in 1939, there had also been experiments with methods of mass killing perpetrated against disabled people. I've been to Auschwitz several times, as was stated, as one of the leaders of the Unite Against Fascism, Stand Up to Racism team that does educational trips there. And every time I go, it hits me in a different way. In Auschwitz I, there are horrifying pictures, drawings by prisoners who survive the bestial brutality by guards. But what haunts me most about Auschwitz is less the frenzied anti-Semitism, the utter hatred of the other, but more the cold, calculating way the Holocaust was brought about as a process of people using their skills and their ingenuity to make mass killing of the other possible. One display shows a map of the 20+ countries where Jews were transported to Auschwitz from. Among the furthest was Norway. Ships collected Jews from Norway, delivered them to Denmark, transferred them by rail to Auschwitz on a 28-hour journey to Auschwitz-Birkenau. One of those ships, the Monte Rosa, took 46 Jews from Norway. 44 of them were gassed at Auschwitz. Britain captured the Monte Rosa later in the war. It was renamed and served other purposes afterwards. In June 1948, it docked at Tilbury under its new name, the Empire Windrush, transporting hundreds of new Caribbean immigrants who came with apprehension and hope, who have contributed so much to Britain, but have been met with prejudice, racism, and discrimination. And now we see our current Tory Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, seeking to renege on the promises to bring justice for the victims of the Windrush scandal. The same Home Secretary who doubles down against the Holocaust survivor, Joan Salter, who absolutely rightly compared Braverman's language to refugees today to the dehumanization of the Jews in Nazi rhetoric. Auschwitz and other death camps were the very end of the process. Anti-racists and anti-fascists right now need to focus on the beginning of that process, the labeling, discrimination, exclusion, scapegoating, dehumanization, and brutalization of particular communities. That was what we saw against the Jews, but also Roma and Sinti gypsies and people with disabilities. Wherever we see those processes against any minority, we need to intervene and be upstanders, not bystanders. The Holocaust survivors I know personally and have as very dear friends, they survived because they were hidden by Polish Catholic upstanders. Long before Holocaust Memorial Day was an officially recognized day in Britain in 2001, I used to attend Holocaust Memorial events in the East End of London, at least from 1982. Only they didn't happen in January. They took place every year on 19th of April, the day that the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising started. These memorial events included personal reminiscence, poetry and songs. They were conducted in Yiddish, the daily language of the vast majority of Jews killed in the Holocaust. The Nazis were determined to eradicate an immensely rich and beautiful culture as well as people. Those events remembered the murdered and celebrated the resistance, not just the physical resistance, but the concealed heroism of those who organized clandestine schools, children art exhibitions, literary events, poetry readings, soup kitchens, libraries, underground newspapers, almost under the noses of the Nazi occupiers, but hidden from them. And it was these activities that kept people alive, that maintained their spirit of hope. Without that work, based on the principles of mutual aid, there couldn't and wouldn't have been physical resistance. What I also remember from those memorial events was that the chair, a Jewish socialist called Maya Bogdansky, would always honor Roma gypsies, whom he declared died in the same way as the Jews for the same reasons. This year will be the 80th anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, an event that every anti-fascist and every anti-racist, whatever their personal identity and background, should hold really close to their heart. In the struggles against autocracy and oppression in 19th century Poland, a slogan was coined, Za naszą I waszą wolność, for our freedom and yours. That slogan was reused by fighters from Poland, many of whom were Jewish, who went to Spain in the late 1930s to fight against Franco's fascists. And it was a slogan in Yiddish used by underground newspapers in the Warsaw Ghetto, for unser und euer Freiheit. It is a slogan that epitomizes the unity and solidarity that must be embraced by all minorities facing any racism and bigotry. But our challenge is to turn slogans into real action for a bessere und schönere Welt, a better and more beautiful world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That was really powerful. We have two more speakers to bring you, and one of whom is Colette Levy. Now, Colette is the child survivor of the Vichy regime, the regime in France that collaborated with the Nazis. And when she was a child, just a child, she had to go into hiding. Her parents sent her to into hiding to survive. They themselves were killed in the Holocaust. Now, Colette, very sadly, is not very well, but she has sent us a video, which we will share with you now. And then we very much hope that she may be able to say a few words herself, if she feels well enough. And then after that, or at some point, we will also be joined by Weyman Bennett, who's one of the co-conveners of Stand Up to Racism. So we'll begin by having a look at sharing Colette's video.
My name is Colette Levy. I'm a survivor of the Second World War Nazi victim. My father died in a concentration camp, and I'm sorry that, well, how I survived is a very incredible story, but it's a long story, because we were hiding in a village outside Poitiers, below the Loire Valley, with my twin, with people we didn't even know. It was terrible. 6 years of age, and we were shipped on a train with no mother, nobody. The two of us on a train. It was crazy. And we spent the whole length of, from 42, we went there in the summer of 1942 and stayed there till 45 at the end of the war. And it was incredible. I mean, the place where we were was a small village which escaped being burnt with the people in the church, like me and the old people of the village. And the men on the cattle field were going to be shot because the Nazis had stolen gold, the gold that they got from our teeth when they killed us, yeah? And it was a terrible story, I tell you. But the commandant of that battalion, it was the Wehrmacht, and he had been a prisoner of the French during the First World War, and he had so-called be well treated. So after 6 hours of debating with our teachers, who were from Alsace-Lorraine originally and spoke perfect German, he saw the light and he decided to move, because he was told that the resistance was so strong that it was the end of the war. They were going to be shot at the end so there was no point killing again another the population of that village. So after 6 hours of debating, they left the village. But it was incredible because they were housed, they occupied our place, our houses. And I remember my sister and we used to go into the attic and hide in a trunk. But obviously, eventually we had to come down to eat, etc., had to go to bed. And this, one of them was, it was a summer, he put a chair outside the house and he put my sister on his knees and she played a game and he said, "Oh, look, I have children too," and more or less I don't agree with this. He was not a hardened Nazi. He was just people who couldn't escape being enrolled in that army. So finally they left the village and we were not killed. So that's the whole story, really. After that we came back to Paris and there was nothing special. We went to a French lycée, one of the best in Paris, luckily for us, with all the general's daughters locally living there and coming to that college.
Okay, I think the video may not have meant to finish there, but it has. And thanks to Colette for providing that for us. But as I said, we do hope that she may be well enough to just say a few brief words at some point. We are hopefully going to be joined very shortly by Weyman Bennett, who I will say a brief thing about now. People may know that he's the co-convenor of Stand Up to Racism. He has also been a lifelong anti-racist activist, and along with David, who spoke earlier, has been involved in organising the trips, the educational trips, Stand Up to Racism and Unite Against Fascism to Auschwitz. So I'm going to ask Weyman, who I think may be travelling, to say a few words to the meeting this evening. Over to you, Weyman.
I'm very sorry that I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I'm very sorry that I'm traveling with Colette and you can't see me in the dark. But we're traveling back from the hospital and hopefully I'll be able to put her on for her, to say a few words to continue her story. But where I want to start off with is that we honor all the people that survived the Holocaust. The lesson that we bring is the lesson of never again. And every year we try and make a trip to Auschwitz to remember those people that lost their lives at the hands of the Nazis, to bring that message out. And what it says, and when you enter, beyond the gates, there's a slogan there that says that those people that don't remember the past are doomed to repeat it. And that's the reason that we go. And this message that, the 6 million or more murdered Jews, the Sinti, Roma that were murdered, the other people that were murdered because of sex, because they were LGBTQ+, the people that were murdered because of their political views, is something which we all have to remember today, because the antecedents, the people who deny the Holocaust, are now unfortunately in significant positions. That's the reason why at Charlottesville people chanted that the Jews will not overcome us, and shockingly they were not condemned by the president at that time, which was President Trump. That's why Bolsonaro in Brazil, that harkens to a past in terms of supporting those organizations. And sadly, 100 years after the fascists marched in Italy, we see the Brothers of Italy and Meloni inside Italy become the president and actually repeat many of the lies of Mussolini, the forerunner of Hitler. I think that when we think about today and the lesson of the Holocaust, which in HMD have said when the ordinary was made normal, I think it's important that we do take a stand against what we see today. The attacks on asylum seekers, the attacks on the very people that want to be able to survive, being denied very basic rights. When Sula Braverman describes people as invaders, I'm reminded of the people that set up Stand Up to Racism, the Holocaust survivors, who always told me that they left their brothers and sisters as part of the Kindertransport on the station steps inside Austria, Germany, and various other countries across Eastern Europe. That should never have happened. People should have been, what should have been said was that refugees are welcome here, that if they need spaces to save their lives, they should be given it. And I think the lesson of after defending the 1951 Refugee Act is in honor of those people that lost their lives and making sure that doesn't happen again. I think that it's important that we stop organizations like Britain First and people that follow them, but also to remember that we have a rich anti-fascist history. The rise of the anti-Nazi League, the people that took on the National Front in the 1970s and the 80s, the British Nazi Party or the BNP, led by Nick Griffin, which stood in many times, was defeated and destroyed together with many anti-fascists and together with Unite Against Fascism. And when we saw the EDL marching on the street, attacking our Muslim sisters and brothers, again, we raised the question of stopping that hate from rising. I think we always have to say that never again has to be made into something real and built, as David, as Rabbi Gluck has said, and as Daniella has said, that we must never forget these lessons. And that's the reason why we have International Holocaust Memorial Day. But I'd also like us to remind, to celebrate the Holocaust, International Holocaust Day, but the march on the 18th of March, to say that today in the modern world we're going to oppose any manifestation of fascism, racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, or any form of division, and make sure that we celebrate and oppose all forms of discrimination and ask people to join us on that day in Cardiff, London, and in Glasgow. I'm going to try and at the moment, I'm with Colette, but what I'll do is that when we get into the other house, because she's not 100% well, is I'll probably do a video of the last few words that she's got to say towards this program, because we're still quite far away from her house. But I want to thank all the speakers that have spoken today on behalf of Stand Up to Racism and all the people that are listening. And let's redouble our efforts to make sure that in 2023 that we build the biggest resistance that's possible. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Weyman. We really do appreciate the fact that that was quite difficult to speak to us from a car on your way from the hospital. If it's possible, we will stay on a little longer so that we can enable Colette to speak to us a little longer. I'm not sure if we'll manage to do that, but we will try to. In the meantime, I think I would like to emphasize the things that Weyman was saying towards the end of his contribution. But first, I think it's important that I thank everybody who has contributed today. What I know everyone will have experienced as very powerful words. And I would say we all need to listen to or to recall all of the words that have been said by our speakers, from Colette to Rabbi Herschel Gluck to Daniella and David Rosenberg and Weyman at the end. All those words complemented each other and created the most powerful message to all of us. And if we can take from that a kind of renewed determination, if you like, a renewed commitment to action, then I think we are all the better for that. To be honest, I think we do see, as all our speakers have said, some very chilling things right now in the world, both in Britain and beyond. And it is down to us, as speakers have said, not to stand by, but to stand up and to stand together, because it only takes people not to do anything for the same things to happen once again, so that the notion of never again doesn't mean what it really needs to mean. And the fact that so many Holocaust survivors have made it their life's work in more recent times to be educating young people and standing again and again and again shows that they need us as they pass away to keep that message going. And it's a message about taking action. So I would say, as Weyman mentioned, there is the International UN Anti-Racism Day on the 18th of March, and there will be marches across the globe, including in Britain, in Glasgow, Cardiff, and in London. And wherever you are, please go on those marches and bring people with you, making a united front against every form of racism at a time when it's very likely that our governments will do everything they can to divide our side. And of course, the end of this week, Holocaust Memorial Day itself, there will be local events and other meetings and commemorations, and it's important to be part of those and to take the message to where we work, where we maybe go to school or college, so that we bring more and more of us, the majority, the anti-racist majority of our country and beyond, into solidarity and action on the streets. And whether that's to march against racism and fascism, or whether it's to stand up in solidarity with refugees, whether it's to bring solidarity to those coming to our shores and being demonized by this current government, it's down to all of us to get active, to get involved, so that in all honesty, we can say that these things will never happen again. History will not repeat itself. And that's because all of us are doing everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. So thank you, everybody who is here this evening, and good night.